The pregnant bobcat emerged from the brush with a limp black puppy dangling from her jaws, freezing wildlife photographer Elena in her tracks as she realized this wasn't a predator with prey. Tears welled in her eyes when the wildcat gently set down the puppy and began grooming it with maternal tenderness, an impossible act of cross-species compassion that defied everything she thought she knew about nature's boundaries. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dusty Texas ranch road as wildlife photographer Elena Ramirez adjusted her camera settings. 3 hours she'd been waiting, perched in a camouflage blind at the edge of the property where ranch hands had reported seeing a pregnant bobcat. The day's heat was finally breaking, and Elena knew this was when the elusive creatures often emerged. She wiped sweat from her brow, careful not to make sudden movements. This was her passion, capturing the untamed beauty of Texas wildlife, especially the increasingly rare bobcats whose territory shrunk with each passing year. A slight movement in her peripheral vision made Elena freeze. There, emerging from the tall grass with deliberate caution, was the bobcat she'd been waiting for. The feline's distinctive spotted coat caught the golden light, and Elena could clearly see the swollen belly that confirmed the ranch hand's reports. The bobcat was indeed pregnant, likely due to deliver within days. "Come on, girl," Elena whispered, barely audible even to herself as she focused her telephoto lens. "Let me see those beautiful eyes." As if hearing her request, the bobcat turned, fixing Elena with an amber stare so intense she almost forgot to press the shutter. But what happened next made her gasp, nearly revealing her position. The bobcat wasn't alone. Dangling from her mouth was something dark and limp, too large to be a mouse or rabbit. Elena's finger pressed the shutter release rapidly, capturing a sequence as the bobcat padded cautiously across the dirt road. Through her viewfinder, Elena finally saw what the predator was carrying. "Oh my God," she whispered, her heart suddenly racing. "That's not possible." It was a puppy, small, black, and completely limp in the bobcat's jaws. Elena's first instinct was to intervene, to save the puppy if it wasn't already too late. But professional ethics kept her frozen in place. Wildlife photographers live by a strict code. Observe, never interfere. Nature could be brutal, but it was not her place to judge or intervene. Still, her heart ached as she watched the pregnant bobcat carefully carrying its prey across the road. But something wasn't right. The way the bobcat held the puppy seemed gentle. Most predators would have already begun feeding, especially with the energy demands of pregnancy. Instead, this bobcat was carrying the puppy as carefully as if it were one of her own kits. Elena continued photographing as the bobcat paused at the road's edge, those intelligent amber eyes scanning for danger before proceeding. The photographer's mind raced with questions. Had the bobcat killed the puppy, but was saving it for later? Was this some rare hunting behavior she'd never documented before? 20 miles away at the Williams family ranch, 7-year-old Mia Williams sat on the front porch steps, tears streaking her dusty cheeks as her father posted another missing dog flyer to their social media accounts. "Don't worry, sweetheart," Jason Williams assured his daughter, though his voice betrayed his lack of conviction. "Shadow will turn up." "But it's been 3 days, Daddy," Mia sniffled, clutching her favorite stuffed animal. "And he's so little. What if a coyote got him?" Jason couldn't bring himself to acknowledge this very real possibility. Their 8-week-old black Labrador puppy had disappeared during a brief thunderstorm 3 nights ago. The family had searched tirelessly, but the surrounding ranch land stretched for hundreds of acres. A small puppy could be anywhere or nowhere at all. "Let's not think like that," Jason said, sitting beside his daughter and putting his arm around her small shoulders. "Shadow's a smart puppy. Remember how quickly he learned to sit?" This brought the ghost of a smile to Mia's tear-stained face. And he almost learned to shake hands, too. The family's phone rang inside the house, and Jason's wife Angela called out from the kitchen. "Jason, it's Elena from the Wildlife Society. She says it's important." Back at her observation point, Elena hadn't moved for nearly 40 minutes, transfixed by what she was witnessing. The bobcat had carried the puppy to a hollow beneath a large mesquite tree not far from the road. Elena had carefully repositioned her blind for a better view, moving with painstaking slowness to avoid detection. What she saw defied everything she knew about bobcat behavior. Instead of eating the puppy, the bobcat had placed it gently on the ground in the hollow, then, even more astonishingly, began grooming it with her rough tongue. Under this attention, the small black form had begun moving weakly. The puppy was alive. Elena could hardly believe what her camera was capturing. The pregnant bobcat continued grooming the puppy with the same attentive care she would give her own kits. When the puppy began making small, distressed sounds, the bobcat curled her body protectively around it, offering warmth and security. This wasn't predatory behavior. This was maternal. With trembling hands, Elena reached for her satellite phone. As the Texas Wildlife Society's lead field researcher, she had connections throughout the region's ranching community. If this puppy belonged to someone, they deserved to know it might still be alive, though in the most unlikely of care. 3 calls later, Elena had her answer. The Williams family, about 20 miles south, had lost a black lab puppy during the thunderstorm. The same storm that had swept through the entire region 3 nights ago. "Angela," Elena said carefully into the phone, "I need you to understand that what I'm about to tell you sounds impossible, but I'm looking at it through my camera lens right now." She explained what she was witnessing, a pregnant bobcat that had somehow found, carried, and was now caring for a small black puppy that matched the description of the Williams' missing shadow. "I don't understand," Angela Williams replied, her voice confused. "Are you saying a wild bobcat has our puppy? Is it hurting him?" "That's just it," Elena said, still watching the extraordinary scene through her lens. "She's not hurting him. She's nurturing him, grooming him, keeping him warm. I've never seen anything like it in 20 years of wildlife observation." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Angela's voice, tight with emotion. "I'm putting you on speaker. My husband and daughter need to hear this." Elena repeated her observation to the whole family, careful to manage expectations. "The puppy appears weak but alive. I don't know how long this has been going on, but he's survived at least this long. The bobcat is heavily pregnant and has created a small den under a mesquite tree. She seems to have adopted him, for lack of a better word." "But why?" came a small voice. Mia, Elena presumed. Why would a bobcat take care of a puppy? It was a question Elena couldn't fully answer. "Nature sometimes surprises us," she said gently. "This bobcat is about to have babies of her own. Sometimes maternal instincts can extend beyond their own species. It's rare, but it happens." "Can we get him back?" Jason Williams asked, the hope in his voice tempered with concern. "That's complicated," Elena replied honestly. "Interfering with a wild bobcat, especially a pregnant one, is dangerous and usually against wildlife regulations. But this is an extraordinary circumstance. I need to contact my supervisor at Texas Parks and Wildlife. This situation needs expert handling." As Elena continued her conversation with the Williams family, the bobcat's ears suddenly perked up, alert to some distant sound Elena couldn't hear. The feline rose carefully, nudging the puppy deeper into the hollow before stepping protectively in front of the den entrance. Something was coming, and the bobcat was preparing to defend not just her unborn kits, but the adopted puppy she had mysteriously taken under her protection. Elena slowly lowered her satellite phone, her eyes never leaving the viewfinder. The bobcat remained vigilant at the entrance of her makeshift den, her spotted body tense with alertness. Whatever had triggered her protective instinct remained unseen from Elena's position, but the wildlife photographer knew better than to dismiss the feline's senses. "I need to go," she whispered into the phone. "Something's happening. I'll call you back." She ended the call with the Williams family, their hopeful voices still echoing in her mind. How could she explain to a 7-year-old girl that retrieving her beloved puppy might be impossible without endangering both the wild bobcat and the very puppy they hoped to save? Through her lens, Elena watched as the bobcat's attention focused on something in the distance. Following the animal's gaze, she spotted movement along the fence line that bordered the ranch property. A pickup truck had pulled up, and 2 men were getting out, unaware of the drama unfolding less than 100 yards away. Ranch hands, Elena realized, recognizing the distinctive logo of the Double Creek Ranch on the truck's door. The very people who had first reported seeing the pregnant bobcat. They were checking the fence line, completely oblivious to how close they were to the makeshift den where a wild predator now guarded a domestic puppy. The bobcat retreated deeper into the hollow, disappearing from view. Elena knew she had to act quickly. If the ranch hands stumbled upon the den, the bobcat might abandon it, or worse, feel cornered and become aggressive. Either scenario would be disastrous. Abandoning her photographer's instinct to remain hidden, Elena emerged from her blind and waved her arms overhead. "Hey, over here!" she called, drawing the attention of the 2 men. They looked up, startled by her sudden appearance in what they had presumed to be empty rangeland. As Elena approached them, she quickly introduced herself, showing her Texas Wildlife Society credentials. "I'm documenting a sensitive wildlife situation," she explained, deliberately vague. "Would you mind continuing your fence check further down the line? Just for today." The older of the 2 men, weathered and sun-beaten with kind eyes, nodded respectfully. "You must be here for that pregnant bobcat Hector spotted yesterday. Magnificent creature." "That's right," Elena confirmed, relieved by their understanding. "She's established a temporary den nearby, and I'd like to minimize disturbances." "Say no more, ma'am," the man replied, tipping his hat. "We've worked this land long enough to respect its wild residents. We'll circle back tomorrow." Elena thanked them, watching as they returned to their truck and drove further down the fence line. Only when they were well out of sight did she release the breath she'd been holding. Her satellite phone vibrated in her pocket. Her supervisor, Dr. Marcus Reyes, returning her urgent call. "Marcus, we have an extraordinary situation," she began without preamble, explaining what she had witnessed: the pregnant bobcat, the rescued puppy, the waiting family. "I've never seen anything like it. She's treating this puppy like it's one of her own." There was a long pause before Dr. Reyes responded. "You're certain it's not predatory behavior delayed by her pregnancy? Saving food for her after she delivers?" "Absolutely certain," Elena replied firmly. "She's grooming it, Marcus, curling around it protectively. The puppy is weak but responsive. This isn't predation, it's adoption." Another thoughtful silence. "You know our protocols, Elena. Non-intervention is the cornerstone of wildlife management." "I know," she conceded. "But this isn't purely a wildlife situation anymore. There's a family whose pet is involved, a little girl who's heartbroken, and frankly, the puppy probably won't survive much longer without proper care, even with the bobcat's attention." She could almost hear Dr. Reyes weighing the options, the ethical considerations that made wildlife management as much art as science. "Who else knows about this?" he finally asked. "Just the family and now you, and possibly those ranch hands, though I didn't specify what I was observing." "Keep it that way," he instructed. "The last thing we need is a crowd of spectators stressing the bobcat. I'll contact our wildlife veterinarian and rehabilitation specialist." We'll need to approach this delicately. Relief washed over Elena. Thank you, Marcus. Don't thank me yet, he cautioned. This is uncharted territory. I've heard of cross-species fostering in controlled environments, but a wild bobcat adopting a domestic puppy. This defies explanation. After ending the call, Elena returned to her observation point. The bobcat had emerged from the den again, apparently satisfied that the threat had passed. The late afternoon sun caught her amber eyes, giving them an almost supernatural glow as she surveyed her territory. What had compelled this wild predator to rescue rather than hunt a helpless puppy? Elena wondered. Was it simply misdirected maternal instinct with her own delivery imminent? Or was there something more complex at work, some experience in the bobcat's past that had created this unprecedented behavior? The answers might never be known. Wild animals kept their secrets close, their motivations a mystery that humans could observe but rarely fully comprehend. An hour later, a discreet forest green SUV with Texas parks and wildlife markings pulled up beside Elena's vehicle. Dr. Reyes emerged along with Dr. Sophia Lin, the department's wildlife veterinarian, and Carlos Vega, their most experienced rehabilitation specialist. "Where are they?" Dr. Lin asked quietly as Elena greeted them. Elena pointed toward the mesquite tree, the hollow beneath it. "She's been in and out, but mostly staying close to the puppy." The three wildlife experts followed Elena's lead, moving slowly and deliberately toward a position where they could observe without disturbing. Dr. Reyes raised his binoculars, focusing on the den entrance. "Remarkable," he murmured after several moments of observation. "The body language is entirely maternal, not predatory." Dr. Lin nodded in agreement. "The question is why? And more importantly, how do we safely separate them without traumatizing either animal?" Carlos Vega, who had spent 30 years rehabilitating injured wildlife, studied the situation with practiced eyes. The bobcat appears healthy but cautious. Judging by her size, she could deliver within days. That complicates matters significantly. "What are our options?" Elena asked. Dr. Lin considered the question carefully. "Ideally, we'd tranquilize the bobcat and retrieve the puppy while she's sedated. But darting a heavily pregnant feline poses serious risks to her unborn kits. And approaching the den directly could trigger defensive aggression," Carlos added, "not to mention the stress could induce premature labor." Dr. Reyes continued watching through his binoculars. "We need more information before making a decision. Elena, you've observed them longest. Has the bobcat been providing the puppy with food, water?" "I haven't seen her bring any prey to the den," Elena admitted. "But she's been gone for short periods. She could have hunted during those absences." "The puppy's survival this long suggests some level of nourishment," Dr. Lin mused. "But a canine can't subsist on a feline diet indefinitely, and that puppy looks severely dehydrated from what I can see." As the experts debated the safest approach, Elena's phone rang. It was Angela Williams. "We're on our way," Angela said before Elena could speak. "We couldn't wait at home knowing Shadow might be alive. We're about 15 minutes from your coordinates." Elena felt a surge of panic. "Angela, please, we have wildlife experts here assessing the situation. It's extremely delicate." "We'll stay back," Angela promised, her voice tight with emotion. "But Mia needs to see for herself. We all do. Please understand." After ending the call, Elena turned to the others. "The family's coming. They've promised to keep their distance, but our timeline just got compressed." Dr. Reyes sighed heavily. "Then we need to make a decision. The puppy's condition is deteriorating, and we now have civilians entering a potentially dangerous wildlife situation." As if sensing the increased urgency, the bobcat emerged completely from the den. In the golden light of the setting sun, they could all see her swollen belly, the deliberate care in her movements. She looked directly at the humans watching her, her wild amber eyes unblinking and unafraid. Then, in a gesture that left even the experienced wildlife experts speechless, she returned to the hollow and emerged with the puppy dangling gently from her mouth. With measured steps, she began walking toward them. "Nobody move," Dr. Reyes whispered, his voice barely audible as the bobcat continued her deliberate approach. "This is unprecedented behavior." Elena's heart pounded in her chest. Her photographer's instinct screamed for her camera, but she remained frozen, afraid any movement might spook the wild feline. The bobcat paused about 30 feet away, the black puppy still dangling gently from her jaws. Those intelligent amber eyes surveyed the humans with what Elena could only describe as cautious assessment. "She's evaluating us," Carlos murmured in disbelief. "I've rehabilitated dozens of bobcats over 30 years, and I've never seen anything like this." Dr. Lin slowly reached for her medical bag, her movements glacially careful. "The puppy appears severely dehydrated, but still alive. She's bringing it to us." "That's not possible," Dr. Reyes objected, though his voice lacked conviction as they all witnessed the impossible unfolding before them. "Wild predators don't willingly approach humans, let alone bring them." He trailed off, unable to find words for what they were seeing. The bobcat took several more steps forward, then gently laid the puppy on the ground. The small black form moved weakly, confirming it was indeed alive. Then, in a gesture that left them all speechless, the bobcat backed away several paces, her eyes never leaving the humans. "She's surrendering it," Elena whispered, tears forming unbidden in her eyes. "She knows." "Knows what?" Dr. Reyes asked, his scientific skepticism warring with the evidence before him. "That the puppy needs help she can't provide," Elena replied. "She's smart enough to recognize when she's reached the limits of her care." The sound of an approaching vehicle broke the spell of the moment. The bobcat's ears flattened against her head, her body tensing at this new intrusion. "The family," Elena said urgently. "They're here." Dr. Lin made a split-second decision. "I'm going for the puppy. Everyone else stay absolutely still." With the practiced calm of someone who had handled countless wild animals, Dr. Lin crouched low and began moving slowly toward where the puppy lay. The bobcat watched intently but didn't retreat further or show signs of aggression. When Dr. Lin reached the puppy, she quickly assessed its condition with gentle hands. "Severe dehydration, hypothermia, but still responsive," she reported quietly, cradling the tiny black form. "I need to get him on fluids immediately." The bobcat continued watching, her tail twitching slightly, but otherwise remaining calm as Dr. Lin carefully backed away with the puppy. Just as she reached the safety of the group, a dusty SUV pulled up behind their vehicles, and the Williams family emerged. Mia spotted them first, her small voice carrying across the distance. "Is that Shadow? Did you find him?" "Stay back," Elena called out, her eyes still fixed on the bobcat. "Please just wait a moment." Dr. Lin had already turned her attention fully to the puppy, working quickly to set up an emergency IV drip from her field kit. Carlos moved to intercept the family, explaining the situation in hushed tones. With the humans' attention diverted, the bobcat seemed to make a decision. She turned and with surprising speed disappeared back into the mesquite thicket, heading toward her den. Only then did Elena exhale fully, the tension of the last few minutes releasing from her body like a physical weight. She turned to see 7-year-old Mia breaking away from her parents, running toward Dr. Lin and the puppy, despite Carlos's attempts to hold her back. "Shadow!" the little girl cried, dropping to her knees beside the veterinarian. "Is he alive? Please say he's alive." Dr. Lin looked up from her work, her expression softening at the child's distress. "He's very sick, sweetheart, but we're doing everything we can. He's a fighter. He's survived 3 days that would have killed most puppies." Mia's parents caught up, their faces etched with the complex emotions of hope, fear, and disbelief. Angela Williams knelt beside her daughter, one arm around her shoulders while Jason stood protectively over them both. "I don't understand," Angela said, looking from the puppy to Elena and back again. "How did a wild bobcat end up with our Shadow? And why didn't she—" She couldn't finish the thought with her daughter present. Elena moved closer, speaking quietly so Mia wouldn't overhear. "We don't know for certain, but from what I observed, she's been caring for him, not hunting him. It defies everything we understand about wild predator behavior." Dr. Reyes joined them, his scientific demeanor tempered by genuine wonder. "We've documented rare cases of cross-species adoption in the wild, lionesses caring for antelope calves, for instance. But those are exceptional anomalies, typically involving prey animals, not competing predators like canines and felines. The storm," Jason Williams said suddenly, his brow furrowing in realization. 3 nights ago, when Shadow disappeared, there was that massive thunderstorm. The puppy must have wandered off and gotten disoriented. Dr. Lin looked up from stabilizing the puppy. That would explain the timing, but not why a pregnant bobcat would choose to rescue rather than hunt a vulnerable puppy. "Something must have triggered her maternal instincts," Carlos suggested. "With her own delivery imminent, perhaps the puppy's distress cries activated a nurturing response that overrode her predatory nature." Mia, who had been listening more closely than the adults realized, offered her own explanation with the simple clarity of childhood. "She knew Shadow needed a mommy, and she was going to be a mommy soon. So she became his mommy until you could find us." The adults exchanged glances, struck by the innocence and unexpected wisdom in the child's words. Perhaps, Elena thought, Mia's explanation was as valid as any scientific theory they might propose. Dr. Lin completed the emergency treatment, carefully wrapping the puppy in thermal blankets. "He's stabilizing, but he's not out of danger. He needs intensive veterinary care immediately. We'll take him to the emergency clinic in San Antonio," Angela decided, already gathering the bundled puppy in her arms with Dr. Lin's guidance. "It's only an hour away." "I'm coming with you," Dr. Lin said firmly. "This puppy requires continuous monitoring, and frankly, I have questions that only specialized tests might answer. How did he survive 3 days with a wild predator? Was he fed? Did the bobcat somehow provide appropriate care?" As the Williams family prepared to depart with Dr. Lin and Shadow, Elena felt compelled to look back toward the mesquite thicket. There, just visible in the deepening twilight, sat the bobcat. She was watching them from a safe distance, her pregnant form silhouetted against the darkening Texas sky. "What about her?" Elena asked quietly, nodding toward the bobcat. "She's about to deliver. After what she's done, it doesn't feel right to just leave." Dr. Reyes considered this, his scientific objectivity at war with the unprecedented events they'd witnessed. "We'll set up monitoring equipment. Given her unusual behavior, there may be value in observing her delivery and maternal care of her own kits. Carlos can remain with a field team." "I'd like to stay too," Elena said, surprising herself with the intensity of her conviction. "I feel connected to her somehow. I want to document what happens next." As the vehicles departed, the Williams family and Dr. Lin headed to San Antonio with Shadow, while Dr. Reyes returned to Austin for additional equipment. Elena and Carlos established a new observation post at a respectful distance from the bobcat's den. Night fell over the Texas rangeland, bringing with it a chorus of insects and the occasional distant howl of coyotes. Elena's camera was equipped for low-light photography, but for now it rested unused beside her. Some moments deserved to be experienced rather than captured. "Do you think she understands that the puppy is gone?" Elena asked softly as they watched the den entrance, barely visible in the moonlight. Carlos considered this, drawing on decades of wildlife experience. "I believe she knows." Whether she understands in human terms is another question, but animals often comprehend more than we give them credit for, especially about loss. As if confirming his words, a soft, plaintive sound emerged from the den, not quite a growl, not quite a cry. It was a sound Elena had never heard a bobcat make before, but its meaning seemed unmistakable. The bobcat was mourning. Dawn broke over the Texas landscape in a spectacular display of pinks and golds, but Elena hardly noticed. She had maintained her vigil through the night, catching brief moments of fitful sleep while Carlos took his turn watching the den. The bobcat had remained mostly hidden, emerging only occasionally to patrol the perimeter of her territory before returning to the hollow beneath the mesquite tree. Elena's satellite phone vibrated with an incoming call. Dr. Lin, with an update on Shadow. The puppy made it through the night, the veterinarian reported, her voice revealing both professional satisfaction and lingering concern. We've addressed the dehydration and hypothermia, but he's still weak. Blood work shows unusual anomalies I'm still trying to understand. What kind of anomalies? Elena asked, moving away from the observation post to avoid disturbing the bobcat. His electrolyte balance should be catastrophically disrupted after 3 days without proper hydration, but it's only moderately abnormal. And there are compounds in his system I wouldn't expect to find in a domestic puppy. Dr. Lin paused. I've sent samples to the university lab for more detailed analysis, but Elena, I think the bobcat may have been feeding him. Feeding him what? Surely not prey animals. No, not exactly. My working theory, and I stress it's just a theory, is that she might have been regurgitating partially digested food for him, similar to how wild canines and felines feed their young before they're ready for solid food. Elena absorbed this information with growing amazement. That would mean she wasn't just providing shelter and warmth. She was actively keeping him alive. It appears so, Dr. Lin confirmed. The Williams family hasn't left his side. The little girl, Mia, has been reading to him all night. She's convinced her voice will help him recover. She might be right. Elena smiled despite her exhaustion. How are they processing all this? It's not exactly a typical lost pet story. They're oscillating between profound gratitude and complete bewilderment. Jason, the father, keeps saying he's going to put up a no-hunting sign on their property. I think he's joking, but not entirely. After ending the call, Elena returned to the observation post where Carlos was monitoring the den with renewed attention. Movement, he whispered, gesturing toward the hollow. Frequent entries and exits, increased restlessness. Classic pre-labor behavior. Elena felt a surge of anticipation mingled with concern. Should we call for a wildlife veterinarian? Carlos shook his head. Bobcats have been delivering kittens without our help for thousands of years. Unless we observe signs of distress, the best thing we can do is maintain our distance. Dr. Reyes should be back with the monitoring equipment soon. That will give us eyes inside the den without disturbing her. As if summoned by their conversation, Dr. Reyes's vehicle appeared on the horizon, moving slowly along the ranch road. By mid-morning, they had established a sophisticated monitoring station at a safe distance from the den. Thermal imaging cameras and sensitive microphones were carefully positioned to observe the bobcat's delivery without human intrusion. This is remarkable technology, Elena commented, as they watched the high-definition feed from inside the den. The bobcat was clearly visible, her sides heaving with increasing frequency as labor progressed. A combination of wildlife conservation tools and borrowed equipment from the university's veterinary program, Dr. Reyes explained. His earlier skepticism now replaced with scientific enthusiasm. We rarely get an opportunity to document bobcat birth in the wild with this level of detail. By early afternoon, the first contractions had visibly intensified. The bobcat paced the small hollow, occasionally pawing at the ground to reshape her nesting area. Her discomfort was evident, but she moved with purpose and calm determination. First-time mothers often struggle more, Carlos observed. But she seems remarkably composed, almost as if she's done this before. Elena finished his thought. But that doesn't make sense with her age. Dr. Reyes, didn't you estimate she's only about 2 years old? This would be her first litter. Dr. Reyes nodded, his brow furrowed in concentration as he studied the footage. Based on her size and development, yes. First litters for bobcats typically occur between their first and second year. A sudden movement on the screen captured their attention. The bobcat had gone completely still, her body tense with effort. Minutes passed in breathless anticipation until finally they saw it, a tiny, wet form emerging into the world. First kit, Dr. Reyes announced, checking his watch to record the time. Healthy delivery. The mother is already cleaning it. Over the next 2 hours, they witnessed the birth of 3 more kittens, each delivered with the ancient, perfect choreography of nature. The bobcat cleaned each kit thoroughly, stimulating their breathing and movement, then guided them to nurse. Her attention never wavered, her instincts executing a flawless birth plan millions of years in the making. As twilight approached, the bobcat had settled with her 4 newborns nestled against her belly. The monitoring equipment captured their tiny, high-pitched mewling and the mother's gentle, rumbling purr. 4 healthy kittens, all nursing successfully, Dr. Reyes confirmed, the scientific detachment in his voice unable to completely mask his wonder. 2 males, 2 females, based on what we can observe. Elena couldn't tear her eyes away from the screen. She's a good mother, she said softly. It's there in every movement, every decision she makes. Carlos nodded in agreement, which makes her behavior with the puppy even more fascinating. Whatever compelled her to rescue Shadow instead of hunting him, it wasn't inexperience or confusion. This is a bobcat who knows exactly what motherhood entails. The satellite phone rang again, Dr. Lin with another update from San Antonio. Shadow's condition has improved significantly, she reported, her voice lighter than during their morning conversation. He's responsive, taking small amounts of water and liquid nutrients. The Williams family is ecstatic. That's wonderful news, Elena replied, watching the screen where the bobcat continued to nurse her newborns. Our mother has delivered 4 healthy kittens, all doing well. There was a pause on the line. Elena, there's something else. Those samples I sent to the university lab? They found trace elements of bobcat milk in the puppy's system. Elena felt her breath catch. Are you saying she actually nursed him? It appears so. Not exclusively. He couldn't have survived on that alone. But in combination with regurgitated food, it's extraordinary. Cross-species nursing is documented but extremely rare, especially between predatory species. After sharing this revelation with Carlos and Dr. Reyes, a thoughtful silence fell over their monitoring station. The implications were profound, challenging fundamental assumptions about wildlife behavior and the boundaries between species. We need to give her a name, Elena said suddenly. It doesn't seem right to keep referring to her as the bobcat after everything we've witnessed. Dr. Reyes, despite his scientific preference for avoiding anthropomorphism, found himself nodding in agreement. What did you have in mind? Elena considered this carefully, watching the new mother tenderly adjusting her position to better accommodate her nursing kittens. Sage, she decided. It means wise one. And there's something profoundly wise about what she's done, recognizing a need beyond her own species and responding with compassion instead of predatory instinct. As night fell once again over the Texas rangeland, Elena found herself wondering what Shadow and Sage might have experienced together during those 3 days. What silent communication had passed between them? What primal understanding had transcended the natural boundaries between predator and prey, wild and domestic? Morning brought a surprise visitor to their monitoring station, Angela Williams arrived alone, having left Mia and Jason at the veterinary clinic with Shadow. Dr. Lynn told me the Bobcat, Sage, had her babies, she explained, her eyes drawn to the monitoring screen where the mother and kittens were visible. I felt like I needed to see her, to understand. Elena gestured to the empty chair beside her. She delivered 4 healthy kittens yesterday afternoon. They're all doing well. Angela sat down, her expression a complex mixture of emotions as she watched the Bobcat family. Shadow opened his eyes this morning, she said quietly. The first thing he did was lick Mia's hand. The veterinarians are calling it a miracle he survived. Not a miracle, Elena corrected gently. Sage. She kept him alive when everything we understand about nature says she should have seen him as prey. Angela's eyes filled with tears as she watched the Bobcat on the screen, tenderly grooming one of her kittens. I needed to thank her, she admitted, her voice breaking slightly. I know how ridiculous that sounds. Elena placed a gentle hand on Angela's shoulder. It doesn't sound ridiculous at all, she assured her. After what we've witnessed these past few days, I think we need to expand our understanding of what's possible between species. Angela wiped her eyes, still watching the screen where Sage lay curled around her kittens. Dr. Lynn explained what they found, about the milk and the regurgitated food. She literally treated Shadow like one of her own. Her voice lowered to a near whisper. What does that mean? For everything we think we know about wild animals? Dr. Reyes, who had been silently observing their conversation, cleared his throat. It means, he said carefully, that the natural world is more complex than our neat scientific categories sometimes allow for. Exceptional individuals exist in every species, those who defy the expected behaviors in ways that challenge our understanding. Like Sage, Elena added. Like Sage, he agreed with a nod. Angela continued watching the screen, seemingly transfixed by the Bobcat family. Will they be safe here, Sage and her kittens? Carlos joined the conversation, his decades of experience evident in his measured response. This is good Bobcat habitat, and she's clearly established her territory. The ranch owners are aware of her presence and supportive of wildlife conservation. But like all wild animals, they face natural challenges, other predators, environmental conditions, human encroachment. Is there anything we can do to help protect them? Angela asked. Dr. Reyes exchanged glances with Elena before responding. Typically, our approach would be complete non-intervention. Wild animals fare best without human involvement. But Sage has already crossed that boundary, Elena pointed out. She initiated contact with humans when she brought Shadow to us. That changes the equation. It does, Dr. Reyes conceded, his scientific caution warring with the unprecedented circumstances. I've proposed a limited monitoring program to my department. Remote observation only, no direct interaction unless absolutely necessary for their welfare. Angela nodded, seemingly satisfied with this compromise. She reached into her purse and removed a small envelope, handing it to Elena. Mia wanted me to give you this, she insisted. Elena opened the envelope to find a child's drawing rendered in bright crayon. It depicted a spotted orange cat, clearly meant to be Sage, alongside a small black puppy and 4 tiny kittens. Above them, in the wobbly handwriting of a 7-year-old, "Thank you for saving Shadow and being his borrowed mommy." Emotion caught in Elena's throat as she studied the simple, heartfelt artwork. Please tell Mia this means a lot to me, and to all of us working with Sage. After Angela departed, promising to keep them updated on Shadow's recovery, the monitoring team settled into their observation routine. Dr. Reyes received permission from the department to establish a more permanent research blind at a respectful distance from Sage's den allowing for extended observation of this exceptional case of cross-species interaction. Days passed, marked by the steady growth of Sage's kittens and increasingly positive reports about Shadow's recovery. The puppy had graduated from emergency care to regular veterinary supervision, with Dr. Lin continuing to document his unusual case for scientific publication. On the 5th day after the births, Elena noticed a subtle change in Sage's behavior. The Bobcat had begun bringing her kittens out of the den for short periods, allowing them to experience the world beyond their hollow while keeping them under vigilant supervision. Normal developmental progression, Carlos confirmed as they watched through high-powered binoculars. She's an exemplary mother. See how she's teaching them even at this early stage? Elena observed as Sage demonstrated grooming behaviors, her rough tongue passing over each kitten in turn. The tiny spotted forms mimicked their mother, their miniature pink tongues darting out in clumsy approximation of her movements. It's remarkable how much parenting crosses species boundaries, Elena mused. The fundamentals are so similar: protection, nourishment, education. Dr. Reyes, who had been analyzing their accumulated data, looked up from his laptop. That may be part of what allowed her to extend maternal care to Shadow. The basic templates of nurturing behavior are deeply encoded in mammalian brains. A call from Dr. Lin interrupted their observations. Shadow's being discharged today, she announced. He's still on a specialized diet and medication regimen, but he's stable enough to go home with the Williams family. That's wonderful news, Elena replied, genuinely delighted at the puppy's recovery. There's more, Dr. Lin continued, her voice taking on a more serious tone. The university lab completed their comprehensive analysis of Shadow's samples. They found something unusual in his blood chemistry. Elena felt a flutter of concern. Unusual how? Nothing dangerous, Dr. Lin quickly clarified, but they identified compounds typically only found in wild felids, specifically immune factors unique to bobcats. It appears that Sage's milk provided Shadow with certain protective elements that may have helped him survive the ordeal. Are you saying her milk actually strengthened him? Elena asked, struggling to process this revelation. In a manner of speaking, yes. It's not something we could have predicted or would recommend. Interspecies nursing carries significant risks, but in this specific case, receiving some bobcat milk alongside the regurgitated food may have given Shadow's system just enough support to survive until he was found. After sharing this information with the team, Elena found herself drawn back to the observation blind, watching Sage with renewed wonder. The bobcat had settled in a patch of dappled sunlight, her kittens tumbling around her in play. Their movements were already showing the coordination and grace that would one day make them efficient predators, though for now they remained endearingly clumsy. As she watched, Elena found herself thinking about the bridge Sage had unconsciously built between wild and domestic worlds. For a brief, extraordinary moment, this wild bobcat had transcended the boundaries that typically separated her kind from humans and their companion animals. In doing so, she had not only saved Shadow's life, but had unknowingly created a connection between two families, her own and the Williams. A week after Shadow's return to the ranch, Elena received a surprising request from the Williams family. They wanted to visit the observation blind to see Sage and her kittens from a safe distance. After consultation with Dr. Reyes and Carlos, they arranged a brief, carefully managed visit. Remember, Elena cautioned as she led Jason, Angela, and Mia toward the blind, we need to remain absolutely quiet. Sage's hearing is exceptionally acute, and while she's shown unusual tolerance for human presence, we don't want to stress her or her kittens. 7-year-old Mia nodded solemnly, her expression serious beyond her years. In her arms, she carried Shadow, now recovered enough to be allowed short, supervised outdoor excursions. The black Labrador puppy had grown noticeably in the weeks since his rescue, his once fragile body filling out with renewed health and vigor. Inside the blind, Elena helped them adjust to using the binoculars, focusing on where Sage was visible at the edge of a small clearing, watching her kittens explore their surroundings. "They're so beautiful," Mia whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. Shadow, who had been contentedly settled in the little girl's lap, suddenly perked up his ears. His nose twitched, and he let out a soft, curious whine. "He senses her," Jason said quietly, looking down at the puppy with amazement. As if confirming his words, Shadow wriggled in Mia's arms, his attention fixed in the direction of the Bobcat family. Mia tightened her grip, looking questioningly at Elena. "It's okay," Elena assured her, "but keep holding him securely. We don't know how Sage would react to seeing him again." They continued their observation in reverent silence, watching as Sage guided her kittens through what appeared to be hunting practice, her patient instruction evident in every movement. After nearly an hour, Angela gently suggested it was time to leave, mindful of both Shadow's need for rest and the researchers' protocols. As they prepared to depart, Mia lingered, her gaze still fixed on the Bobcat family. "Will they remember each other?" she asked Elena, looking down at Shadow and then back toward Sage. Elena considered the question carefully, not wanting to anthropomorphize, but also not wanting to dismiss the profound connection they had witnessed. "I believe Sage would recognize Shadow," she said finally. "And somewhere in Shadow's memory, there might be an imprint of the mother who saved him when he needed it most." Satisfied with this answer, Mia nodded and followed her parents out of the blind. As Elena watched them go, Shadow's small black head visible over the little girl's shoulder, she reflected on how their lives had been irrevocably changed by Sage's inexplicable act of cross-species compassion. 2 weeks passed, marked by the steady growth of Sage's kittens and the continued recovery of Shadow. The observation team had settled into a rhythm, documenting the Bobcat family's development while maintaining the respectful distance that wildlife research demanded. Elena had extended her assignment, postponing other projects to continue documenting this extraordinary case. The story, however, proved impossible to contain within scientific circles. A local newspaper had picked up on rumors of the unusual rescue, publishing a small article about a bobcat that had saved a puppy. From there, the story spread like wildfire, first to regional news outlets, then to national media, and finally to international publications. Emails and calls flooded into the Texas Wildlife Society, requesting interviews, photographs, and access to what people were already calling the miracle at Double Creek Ranch. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," Dr. Reyes said grimly, scrolling through the latest batch of media inquiries on his tablet. Public fascination with unusual animal behavior can quickly become intrusive. Elena understood his concern. Their small research team had already intercepted several unauthorized attempts to approach Sage's den by well-meaning but disruptive visitors. "What are our options?" "Limited," he admitted. "We can't effectively cordon off an entire section of private ranch land, and we don't have the authority to establish a no-fly zone to prevent news helicopters." Carlos, who had been quietly listening to their conversation, offered a practical suggestion. "Perhaps we can channel the public interest rather than fight it. Controlled information release, selected footage shared through official channels, maybe even a dedicated webcam at a safe distance." Dr. Reyes considered this approach. "A managed narrative might be our best option. I'll consult with the department's public affairs team." By the following day, they had implemented a new strategy. The Texas Wildlife Society established an official information portal for the Sage and Shadow story, featuring carefully selected footage, expert commentary, and daily updates on the Bobcat family's progress. The Williams family agreed to limited interviews about Shadow's recovery, conducted away from the ranch to protect Sage's territory from curious visitors. The approach worked better than they had dared hope. Media outlets gratefully used the provided materials rather than pursuing their own, more intrusive coverage. Public fascination transformed into respectful interest, with wildlife organizations nationwide using the story to promote broader messages about conservation and coexistence. Elena found herself serving as an unexpected spokesperson, her photography and first-hand observations forming the backbone of the official narrative. Her images of Sage guiding her kittens through early hunting lessons captured hearts worldwide, while her account of the Bobcat bringing Shadow to humans for help inspired countless discussions about animal intelligence and interspecies compassion. One morning, as Elena reviewed footage from the previous night, she noticed something concerning. Sage had become unusually alert around midnight, gathering her kittens closer to the den entrance and assuming a protective posture. The Bobcat's behavior suggested she had detected a potential threat. Elena quickly reviewed footage from their perimeter cameras, scanning for whatever might have triggered Sage's alarm. There, at the edge of the frame, a brief flash of movement. She enhanced the image, her concern deepening as the grainy footage revealed the distinctive form of a coyote moving along the boundary of Sage's territory. A single coyote wouldn't normally pose a significant threat to an adult bobcat, but with 4 vulnerable kittens to protect, the dynamics changed dramatically. Elena immediately shared her observation with the team. Coyotes have been unusually active this season, Carlos confirmed after reviewing the footage. The drought has pushed them to expand their hunting territories. Dr. Reyes frowned thoughtfully. Under normal circumstances, we wouldn't intervene. Territorial competition is a natural part of wildlife dynamics. But these aren't entirely normal circumstances, Elena pointed out. Sage's case has already become exceptional in multiple ways. They decided to increase their monitoring frequency while maintaining their non-intervention policy. If the coyote presence escalated into a direct threat, they would reassess. But for now, they would trust Sage's natural protective abilities. That afternoon, Elena received an unexpected call from Angela Williams. Shadow's been acting strangely since yesterday, Angela explained, concern evident in her voice. He's restless, whining at the doors and windows. The veterinarian checked him over and found nothing physically wrong, but he's clearly distressed about something. Elena felt a prickle of unease, remembering the coyote footage. When did this behavior start? Around midnight last night, he woke up Mia with his whining, and he hasn't settled since. The timing aligned perfectly with when Sage had detected the potential threat, too perfectly to be coincidental. Angela, this may sound strange, but I think Shadow might be sensing something that's happening with Sage. You mean some kind of connection between them? Still. We've already documented physiological evidence of their bond through the transferred immune factors, Elena reasoned. It's not implausible that some form of sensory connection remains. After discussing the coyote sighting, Angela made a surprising proposal. Jason and I have been talking. Our property backs up to the western edge of Double Creek Ranch. We've been considering establishing a protected wildlife corridor through our land. It would create a safe passage away from areas where coyotes typically den. Elena was momentarily speechless. That's an incredibly generous offer, but it would be a significant commitment. Shadow is alive because of Sage, Angela said simply. And our daughter now wants to be a wildlife biologist because of what she's witnessed. Creating a safe haven for bobcats and other wildlife feels like the right thing to do. When Elena shared the Williams family's proposal with Dr. Reyes and Carlos, their initial skepticism gave way to cautious optimism. Private conservation initiatives were becoming increasingly important supplements to formal protection programs, especially for species like bobcats that required large, connected territories. If they're serious, we could help them establish something meaningful, Dr. Reyes acknowledged. The department has programs to support private landowners in wildlife conservation efforts. The following days brought increased coyote activity, confirming their concerns. Sage responded by moving her kittens to a more concealed location within her territory, a natural hollow beneath a limestone outcropping that offered better protection than the original den. The research team adjusted their monitoring equipment accordingly, careful to maintain their unobtrusive presence. On the seventh night after the first coyote sighting, their cameras captured a concerning scene. 3 coyotes had entered the edge of Sage's territory, moving with the coordinated purpose of a hunting party. Sage had positioned herself between the approaching predators and her kitten's hiding place, her body language communicating unmistakable warning. Elena, monitoring the live feed from their observation blind, felt her heart racing as she watched the standoff unfold. Sage was an impressive defender. Bobcats were known to successfully drive off animals larger than themselves when protecting their young, but 3 coyotes presented a formidable challenge. The lead coyote advanced cautiously, testing Sage's resolve. The bobcat responded with a fearsome display, back-arched, fur bristling, a penetrating scream cutting through the night air. The coyote hesitated, clearly reassessing the risk. For several tense minutes, the confrontation remained at a stalemate, neither side willing to retreat or escalate. Then, unexpectedly, a new sound joined the standoff, the deep, resonant bark of a large dog coming from the direction of the Williams property. The research team watched in astonishment as a familiar black form raced into view, not the small puppy they had last seen, but Shadow, now noticeably larger and moving with purpose. Behind him came Jason Williams, armed with a flashlight and what appeared to be a non-lethal deterrent horn. The combined presence of dog, human, and a fiercely defensive bobcat proved too much for the coyote hunting party. They retreated, melting back into the darkness beyond the camera's range. In the observation blind, Elena, Carlos, and Dr. Reyes exchanged looks of disbelief. Did Shadow just come to Sage's defense? Carlos asked, voicing the question they were all thinking. It appears so, Dr. Reyes replied, his scientific caution momentarily overshadowed by what they had witnessed. Though whether it was intentional or coincidental. It wasn't coincidental, Elena interrupted with quiet certainty. Shadow knew. Somehow, he knew Sage was in danger. On the monitor, they watched as Jason kept a respectful distance, gently calling Shadow back to his side. The dog complied reluctantly, casting what almost seemed like a backward glance toward where Sage remained vigilant at her defensive position. Then both human and dog retreated toward their property line, leaving Sage to return to her kittens. When Jason arrived at their research station 30 minutes later, his expression was a mixture of apology and amazement. Shadow broke through our screen door, he explained, still catching his breath. He's never done anything like that before. He was just determined. I followed him because I was afraid he'd get hurt, but it seemed like he knew exactly where he was going. Elena nodded slowly, directly to Sage, just when she needed help. The incident with the coyotes transformed what had already been an extraordinary research case into something that challenged the very foundations of how scientists understood animal relationships. Dr. Reyes, despite his initial scientific skepticism, now found himself spearheading an expanded research initiative to document and understand the apparent bond between Sage and Shadow. I've consulted with animal behaviorists at 3 universities, he explained during their team meeting the following morning. None of them can offer a conventional explanation for what we witnessed last night. Elena, who had spent the pre-dawn hours reviewing and documenting the footage, nodded in agreement. The timing and directness of Shadow's response suggests something beyond coincidence. He didn't just wander in that direction. He moved with purpose directly to where Sage was confronting the coyotes. Could it be scent-driven? Carlos suggested. We know canines have extraordinary olfactory capabilities. Perhaps Shadow detected the coyotes or Sage's stress pheromones. From that distance, across property lines and multiple barriers? Dr. Reyes shook his head. It's possible but unlikely to be the complete explanation, and it doesn't account for the reports of Shadow's distress beginning exactly when Sage first detected the coyote presence. They were venturing into uncharted scientific territory, a place where the neat boundaries between documented animal behavior and unexplained phenomena became blurred. Helena found herself both professionally excited and personally moved by the implications. What if, she proposed carefully, the period when Sage cared for Shadow created some form of connection we don't yet understand? We've already confirmed physiological links through the shared antibodies and immune factors. Perhaps there are neurological or sensory connections we don't have the tools to measure yet. Dr. Reyes didn't dismiss the suggestion outright, which itself represented a significant shift in his approach. It's a hypothesis worth exploring, though difficult to test with our current methodologies. The Williams family, meanwhile, had accelerated their plans to establish a wildlife corridor on their property. Jason, a civil engineer by profession, worked with conservation specialists to design habitat features that would appeal specifically to bobcats and other native species, while deterring predators like coyotes that might threaten Sage and her family. We're installing motion-activated deterrent systems along the boundaries, Jason explained when he visited the research station with preliminary plans. Non-harmful light and sound emissions that coyotes find uncomfortable, but don't affect bobcats or other wildlife we want to protect. Elena was impressed by the thoroughness of their approach. This goes beyond just helping Sage. You're creating something that could benefit wildlife for generations. Jason smiled, a bit embarrassed by her praise. Mia's been researching bobcat conservation for a school project. She's determined to make sure Sage's kittens have a safe place to establish their own territories when they're grown. His expression grew more serious. After what Shadow did, coming to Sage's defense like that, it feels like we're all connected somehow. Our family, your research team, Sage, and her kittens. The connection Jason described became even more apparent as Shadow's behavior continued to evolve. The Williams family, with Dr. Lynn's guidance, began documenting the dog's reactions and movements. Clear patterns emerged. Shadow consistently oriented himself toward Sage's location, regardless of where he was on the Williams property. He became alert and watchful at precisely the times when Sage was most active with her kittens. Perhaps most remarkably, he exhibited signs of distress whenever Sage encountered potential threats, even when those encounters occurred beyond his sensory range. Dr. Lynn arranged for Shadow to undergo specialized neurological testing at the university's veterinary center. The results, while not conclusive, suggested fascinating possibilities. His brain activity shows unusual patterns in the limbic system, the emotional center, when he's oriented towards Sage's territory, she reported during a video conference with the research team. And there are anomalies in his pineal gland activity that I've never seen before in domestic dogs. The pineal gland? Elena questioned. Isn't that associated with hormonal regulation and circadian rhythms? Primarily, yes, Dr. Lynn confirmed. But in some species, it's also linked to environmental sensitivity and what some researchers call spatial awareness. There are studies suggesting it may play roles we don't fully understand in certain animals' abilities to navigate or sense distant events. While the scientists sought explanations, Sage continued raising her kittens with exemplary care. Now nearly a month old, the young bobcats were showing increasing independence, venturing further from their mother during supervised explorations. Their hunting skills were developing through play, their spotted coats helping them blend into the dappled light of their woodland territory. Elena's documentation of their development had become the centerpiece of the Texas Wildlife Society's educational outreach. Her photographs and footage, accompanied by expert commentary, had transformed public perception of bobcats from feared predators to essential components of a healthy ecosystem. Thousands of people followed the daily updates, invested in the well-being of Sage and her family in a way that transcended typical wildlife interest. "You've created Bobcat ambassadors," Carlos observed as they reviewed the latest engagement statistics. People who've never given a thought to wildlife conservation are now advocating for habitat protection because they feel connected to Sage's story. The morning of the kitten's 5-week milestone brought a development that even the experienced research team hadn't anticipated. Elena arrived at the observation blind before dawn, settling in for her regular monitoring shift. As the first light broke over the Texas landscape, she trained her camera on the limestone outcropping where Sage had relocated her family. The bobcat emerged as usual, stretching in the early morning sun before checking her surroundings. But when she returned to the den to escort her kittens out for their morning activities, Elena noticed something odd about the group that followed her. She adjusted her binoculars, blinking in disbelief at what she saw. Following behind Sage's 4 spotted kittens was a small black form, Shadow, moving carefully among the bobcat family as if he belonged there. Elena's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her satellite phone, calling Dr. Reyes while keeping her eyes fixed on the extraordinary scene unfolding before her. "Shadow is here," she said without preamble when he answered. "With Sage and the kittens. He's somehow made his way from the Williams property to Sage's den, and she's accepting his presence." Dr. Reyes's voice reflected her own astonishment. "Are you certain? Is there any sign of aggression or distress from Sage?" "None," Elena confirmed, continuing to document the interaction. "She's treating him almost like another one of her kittens. He's following the family group, maintaining appropriate distance, mirroring their movements. It's unlike anything I've ever seen." Within an hour, the entire research team had assembled at the observation blind, joined by Jason Williams, who confirmed that Shadow had disappeared from their property during the night. "We assumed he was somewhere on our land," Jason explained, watching through binoculars as his family's dog moved through the underbrush alongside the bobcat kittens. "The door was closed. He must have found another way out. Or he was determined enough to create one," Elena suggested, remembering how Shadow had broken through a screen door during the coyote incident. They observed in fascinated silence as Sage led her mixed family through what appeared to be a hunting lesson. The bobcat kittens pounced on insects and leaves, practicing the stalking and ambush techniques that would eventually make them successful hunters. Shadow watched these activities with apparent interest, occasionally mimicking the kittens' movements in a display that blurred the boundaries between canine and feline behavior. "This challenges everything we understand about interspecies relationships," Dr. Reyes said quietly, "particularly between natural competitors like bobcats and canines." "Maybe that's the point," Elena replied, not taking her eyes from the viewfinder as she continued documenting the unprecedented interaction. "Maybe Sage and Shadow are showing us that the categories and boundaries we've established aren't as fixed as we thought." The question of what to do about Shadow's integration into the bobcat family sparked intense debate among the research team. Their non-intervention policy had been established to protect Sage and her kittens from human disturbance, but Shadow's presence introduced a complex new variable. "From a purely wildlife management perspective, we should remove him," Dr. Reyes argued, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced by his own position. "Domestic dogs don't belong in bobcat family groups, regardless of their shared history." Carlos took a more moderate stance. "Shadow isn't just any domestic dog in this scenario. He has a demonstrated bond with Sage that predates her kittens, and she's clearly accepting his presence." "There's also the question of Shadow's welfare," Elena added. "He's not a wild animal. He needs proper nutrition, veterinary care, protection from the elements that his domesticated physiology isn't adapted for. The discussion might have continued indefinitely if not for the arrival of Angela and Mia Williams. 7-year-old Mia, upon learning of her dog's whereabouts, had insisted on seeing for herself. Now, observing through binoculars from the research blind, her reaction surprised everyone. "Shadow needs to come home at night," she declared with the simple certainty of childhood. "But he should be allowed to visit his Bobcat family during the day if he wants to." The adults exchanged glances, struck by the elegant compromise in the child's solution. Dr. Lin, who had joined them via video conference, offered her professional perspective. From a veterinary standpoint, it's not unprecedented. Working dogs often move between domestic settings and more wild environments. Border collies on ranches, hunting dogs in rural areas. They navigate multiple worlds successfully. "Could it actually work?" Jason asked, looking between the experts. "Some kind of shared custody arrangement?" Dr. Reyes rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "It would require careful management, but with your property adjacent to Sage's territory and the wildlife corridor you're establishing." He trailed off, considering the possibilities. "We could monitor Shadow's health closely," Dr. Lin suggested. "Design a protocol that respects both his domestic needs and this extraordinary connection he's formed." And so began what the research team privately termed the interspecies family experiment. With careful planning and constant monitoring, they established a system that allowed Shadow to spend daylight hours with Sage and her kittens while returning to the Williams home each evening. Initially, they worried the arrangement would confuse the dog or disrupt the Bobcat family, but both animals seemed to understand the parameters intuitively. Shadow would arrive at the edge of Sage's territory each morning, waiting patiently until she appeared to escort him to wherever the family was spending the day. In the evenings, he would separate voluntarily, returning to the Williams property where Mia waited to welcome him home. The unprecedented arrangement drew attention from wildlife biologists worldwide. Research teams from universities across the country requested permission to observe and document this remarkable case study in cross-species bonding. Dr. Reyes, protective of both the animals' welfare and the integrity of their research, limited access to selected specialists who could contribute meaningfully to their understanding without disrupting the delicate balance they had achieved. As weeks passed, patterns emerged that challenged conventional wisdom about species boundaries. Shadow began adopting certain feline behaviors, moving with greater stealth, responding to the subtle ear and tail signals Sage used to communicate with her kittens. More surprisingly, the Bobcat kittens displayed occasional canine social behaviors, likely learned from their unusual sibling. "They're creating their own communication system," observed Dr. Marissa Keller, an animal cognition specialist from Cornell University, who had been granted limited observation privileges. "It's not purely Bobcat behavior or purely canine. It's a hybrid language specific to this unique family group." Elena documented these developments meticulously, her photographs and footage providing unprecedented insight into this extraordinary relationship. Her work caught the attention of National Geographic, which commissioned a feature article on what they called the unlikely family of Double Creek Ranch. 6 weeks into the arrangement, they encountered their first significant challenge. Shadow arrived at the research station early one morning, clearly distressed and unwilling to leave despite the team's efforts to direct him toward Sage's territory. "Something's wrong," Elena concluded after 30 minutes of the dog's unusual behavior. "He wants us to follow him." With cautious optimism that they were correctly interpreting Shadow's intent, Elena and Carlos followed the dog as he led them not toward Sage's established territory, but to a densely wooded area near the boundary between the ranch and Williams' property. "This is part of the wildlife corridor Jason has been developing," Carlos noted as they carefully made their way through the undergrowth. Shadow moved with purpose, occasionally looking back to ensure they were following before continuing with determined focus. After nearly half a mile, he stopped abruptly, looking meaningfully at a fallen oak tree whose massive root system created a natural cavern. Elena approached carefully, her experienced eyes scanning for signs of wildlife. What she found made her breath catch. Sage and her kittens had relocated to this new den, and one of the kittens lay apart from its siblings, visibly struggling to breathe. "The kitten's sick," she whispered to Carlos, who immediately contacted Dr. Lin while Elena assessed the situation. Sage watched them warily, but without aggression, her behavior suggesting she recognized them as non-threatening. Most remarkably, she made no move to prevent them from approaching the struggling kitten, almost as if she understood they could help. Within hours, Dr. Lin had arranged for an emergency field intervention. With specialized equipment and expertise in wildlife veterinary medicine, she was able to diagnose and treat the kitten's respiratory infection without removing it from its family. "This is why Shadow was so distressed," Dr. Lin explained as they monitored the kitten's response to treatment. "He somehow sensed the illness before we could detect it visually, and he deliberately brought help." The incident transformed their understanding of Shadow's role in the Bobcat family. He wasn't simply an adopted sibling or unusual companion. He had become a crucial bridge between the wild and human worlds, capable of seeking intervention when Sage's kittens needed help beyond what their mother could provide. As news of the successful intervention spread, public interest in the Sage-Shadow story intensified. Conservation organizations leveraged this attention to advocate for expanded wildlife protections, citing the Double Creek Ranch case as evidence of the complex intelligence and adaptability of species previously underestimated. The Williams family found themselves unexpected conservation celebrities, their wildlife corridor project, attracting both attention and funding. Jason embraced the opportunity, expanding their initial plans to include educational components where school groups could learn about wildlife conservation through carefully managed observation areas far from Sage's territory. "We never imagined our family dog would change our lives this way," Angela reflected during a quiet moment at the research station. "Or that he'd help change how people think about wildlife." Dr. Reyes, whose scientific caution had gradually yielded to the overwhelming evidence of something extraordinary, nodded thoughtfully. "The most valuable discoveries often come from the least expected sources." As the kittens reached their 8th week, another milestone approached, the time when young bobcats typically begin venturing further from their mother, developing the independence that would eventually lead to establishing their own territories. The research team watched with particular interest to see how this natural developmental stage would affect the unconventional family dynamics. Will Shadow understand when it's time for the kittens to become more independent? Elena wondered aloud during their daily observation. Will his presence interfere with their natural development? Carlos, whose decades of wildlife experience had given him profound insight into animal behavior, shared his perspective. "I believe Shadow understands more than we give him credit for. He's shown remarkable sensitivity to bobcat social dynamics so far." His prediction proved accurate. As Sage began encouraging her kittens to explore independently, Shadow seemed to intuitively adjust his behavior, remaining present but increasingly peripheral, allowing the young bobcats the space they needed to develop crucial survival skills. "He's not just mimicking Sage's parenting," Dr. Keller observed during her final research visit. "He's complementing it in ways that suggest genuine understanding of bobcat development needs. It's as if he knows he's not a bobcat, but has found an appropriate supporting role in their family system." Fall painted the Texas landscape in burnished gold and russet as Sage's kittens approached their 12th week, a critical developmental milestone in bobcat maturation. The research team observed with bittersweet anticipation, knowing that nature's timetable would soon bring significant changes to the extraordinary family they had documented for nearly 3 months. Bobcat dispersal typically begins between 12 and 20 weeks. Dr. Reyes explained during a team meeting at the now permanent research facility established on the boundary between Double Creek Ranch and the Williams property. The kittens will start making overnight explorations away from Sage, gradually expanding their range as they develop hunting proficiency. Elena, whose documentation had expanded to include a forthcoming book about Sage and Shadow's unprecedented relationship, nodded thoughtfully. How do you think this will affect Shadow? He's become so integrated into their family dynamics. The question remained unanswered as they continued their daily observations. The answer, when it came, surprised even the experienced wildlife specialists. It began with the most adventurous of Sage's kittens, a male they had designated SB1, Sage's Baby 1, in their official documentation, though Mia had nicknamed him Scout for his bold explorations. Scout had begun venturing further from the family group, sometimes spending hours investigating new territory before returning to his mother and siblings. On a crisp October morning, Elena was reviewing overnight footage when she noticed something remarkable. Scout had embarked on what appeared to be his first all-night excursion, but he hadn't gone alone. The cameras had captured Shadow accompanying the young Bobcat, maintaining a watchful distance while allowing Scout the independence to explore and practice hunting. He's, mentoring him, Elena realized, calling Carlos over to review the footage. Shadow is essentially providing backup while Scout learns to navigate independently. Carlos studied the interaction with growing amazement. It's like having a safety net. Scout gets to practice independence with reduced risk because Shadow is there to alert him to dangers or help if needed. Over the following weeks, a pattern emerged with each of Sage's kittens. As they reached the developmental stage where exploration and independence became crucial to their survival skills, Shadow would accompany them on their excursions, never interfering with their hunting or territorial marking, but providing a protective presence that allowed them to venture further than typically safe for inexperienced young bobcats. He's essentially functioning as an uncle or older sibling figure, Dr. Keller observed during her final research visit. In human terms, we might call it scaffolding, providing temporary support that enables learning and growth until the support is no longer needed. The arrangement seemed to accelerate the kitten's development while reducing the natural risks associated with this vulnerable period. Scout, under Shadow's watchful eye, successfully made his first rabbit kill 3 weeks earlier than expected for a bobcat his age. The other kittens showed similar advances in hunting skills and territorial awareness. This unexpected development captured the attention of wildlife conservation specialists worldwide. If the presence of an appropriate companion species could enhance survival rates during the critical dispersal phase, it suggested possibilities for improving outcomes in rehabilitation and reintroduction programs for threatened species. It's not something we could deliberately replicate in most situations, Dr. Reyes cautioned during a symposium organized by the Texas Wildlife Society. The Shadow-Sage relationship grew from unique circumstances that we can't ethically engineer, but it does suggest we should reconsider some of our assumptions about species isolation in wildlife management. As autumn deepened toward winter, the research team documented another fascinating adaptation. Shadow, whose short Labrador coat wasn't designed for the increasingly cold nights, would return to the Williams home each evening as usual. But instead of remaining there until morning as he had during warmer months, he would emerge before dawn, making his way to wherever the Bobcat family had sheltered for the night. He's maximizing his effectiveness, Dr. Lynn observed, getting the care he needs as a domestic animal while still fulfilling his role in the Bobcat family when they're most active. The Williams family embraced this evolution in their unusual shared custody arrangement, installing a specialized dog door that allowed Shadow freedom to follow his extraordinary calling while ensuring he received proper nutrition and care. Mia had taken to preparing what she called Shadow's work lunch. Carefully portioned dog food packed in a specialized harness the research team had designed to allow Shadow to carry supplies without impeding his movement. "He's like a park ranger," the now 8-year-old explained seriously to a documentary crew that had received permission to interview the family. "He watches over Sage and her babies and makes sure they're safe, but he comes home to us because we're his family too." The approaching winter brought a new challenge to the Double Creek Ranch ecosystem. Unusually heavy rainfall had swollen the creek that ran through both properties, and wildlife monitoring cameras captured concerning images of rising water approaching the lowland areas, where Sage occasionally hunted with her maturing kittens. "If this rain continues, we could see significant flooding in these sections," Jason Williams warned during an emergency meeting with the research team. His engineering background had proven invaluable in anticipating environmental challenges to the Wildlife Corridor project. Elena reviewed the territorial data they had gathered over the previous months. "Sage hasn't established flood response patterns that we've documented. Bobcats typically avoid water, but with 4 nearly grown kittens and limited higher ground within her established territory, they decided to increase monitoring without intervention, trusting Sage's natural instincts while remaining alert for signs of distress. Shadow, however, appeared to have his own assessment of the situation. The dog began systematically herding the Bobcat family away from low-lying areas whenever they approached, using body-blocking techniques reminiscent of his Labrador Retriever heritage. More remarkably, he led Sage and her kittens on exploratory excursions to higher ground on the Williams property, areas included in the Wildlife Corridor but previously unexplored by the Bobcat family. "He's showing them escape routes," Carlos observed with undisguised admiration, "preparing them for the possibility of flooding by familiarizing them with safe alternatives." 2 days later, his preparation proved prescient. An overnight storm system dumped 7 inches of rain on the watershed, sending the creek over its banks and flooding significant portions of the lowland territory. The research team activated emergency protocols, prepared to intervene if the Bobcat family became trapped by rising waters. Their concern proved unnecessary. Monitoring cameras captured Sage leading her kittens confidently along the exact routes Shadow had shown them, navigating to higher ground well ahead of the advancing floodwaters. Shadow himself served as rear guard, ensuring no kitten lagged behind or became disoriented in the heavy rain. "He anticipated this," Dr. Reyes said quietly as they watched the footage. "Somehow, he assessed the environmental threat and took preventative action days before our sophisticated monitoring systems triggered warnings." The flood incident, documented in detail by the research team, became a turning point in how their work was perceived by the broader scientific community. What had begun as an anomalous case of cross-species adoption had evolved into compelling evidence of sophisticated cognitive and social adaptations that defied conventional understanding of both wild and domestic species. "We're witnessing evolutionary adaptation in real time," proposed Dr. Ethan Montrose, a renowned evolutionary biologist who had joined their expanded research initiative. "Not genetic evolution, but behavioral evolution. Species adapting to each other's presence in ways that enhance mutual survival and success." The public response to the flood story was equally profound. Media coverage highlighted Shadow's preventative action and Sage's trust in his guidance, resonating with audiences far beyond those typically engaged with wildlife conservation. Donations to both the Texas Wildlife Society and the Williams Private Conservation Initiative increased dramatically, enabling expanded protections for bobcat habitats throughout the region. As winter settled fully over Double Creek Ranch, Elena found herself reflecting on the journey that had begun with a simple highway wildlife call. What had started as an isolated incident of interspecies Compassion had grown into something that was reshaping scientific understanding and public perception alike. Spring arrived at Double Creek Ranch in a riot of bluebonnets and Indian paintbrush, transforming the winter-brown landscape into a canvas of vibrant color. For Sage's kittens, now nearly 7 months old and approaching full maturation, it marked the final phase of their development under their mother's guidance. For the research team, it represented both culmination and transition in their unprecedented study. Traditional dispersal patterns suggest the young bobcats will soon establish independent territories, Dr. Reyes explained during a presentation to conservation officials who had come to witness firsthand the remarkable interspecies family that had captured worldwide attention. Typically, this occurs between 7 and 11 months, with males dispersing further than females. Elena, whose daily documentation had created an unparalleled visual record of this extraordinary case, found herself unexpectedly emotional at the prospect. After everything we've witnessed, it's hard to imagine them separating. The separation, when it began, unfolded with the same remarkable adaptations that had characterized the entire unique family journey. Scout, the most adventurous male, was first to establish a distinct territory, selecting an area that overlapped with the eastern edge of the Williams Wildlife Corridor. Within weeks, his sister, nicknamed Willow by Mia, claimed adjacent territory to the north, while the remaining 2 kittens showed signs of preparing for their own independence. Most fascinating to the research team was Shadow's response to this natural transition. The dog, now fully grown and comfortable in his role as interspecies ambassador, adjusted his routine with intuitive precision. He continued regular visits to Sage, but expanded his rounds to include brief check-ins with the newly independent young bobcats, seemingly monitoring their welfare without infringing on their territorial independence. "He's maintaining the extended family connection," Carlos observed, "while respecting their need for autonomy. It's remarkably sophisticated social behavior." This delicate balancing act became particularly evident when a young male bobcat from outside the family group appeared at the edge of Sage's territory. Under normal circumstances, a mother bobcat would drive away potential suitors until her current litter had fully dispersed. The research team watched with fascination as Shadow initially positioned himself as a deterrent, helping Sage maintain appropriate boundaries until her 2 remaining kittens had established their independence. "He understands the natural progression," Dr. Keller noted during her final research visit. "He's not interfering with normal bobcat behavior. He's facilitating it in ways that optimize outcomes for all involved." Once the final kittens had claimed their own territories, one establishing a range that included part of a neighboring ranch that had joined the expanded Wildlife Corridor initiative, the other selecting a remote section of Double Creek Ranch. Shadow's relationship with Sage entered a new phase. Their interactions became less frequent, but no less significant, transitioning from daily family life to what Elena described as a profound interspecies friendship. The research project, originally planned for 6 months, had expanded to a full year of intensive study, followed by ongoing monitoring. As they prepared the transition to a less intrusive observation protocol, Elena found herself reflecting on the journey with Mia Williams during a quiet moment at the observation blind. "Will Sage be okay when you all leave?" the 8-year-old asked, peering through binoculars at the bobcat sunning herself on a limestone outcropping. Elena smiled at the child's perceptiveness. "We're not really leaving, just changing how we observe, and Sage was taking care of herself long before we arrived. She's an extraordinarily capable bobcat." Mia considered this, her expression thoughtful beyond her years. "But she'll miss Shadow if he stops visiting her, right?" "I think Shadow will always visit her," Elena replied gently. "Their connection is special. It doesn't depend on our research project." Like how Shadow is our dog but also part of the wilderness, Mia suggested, articulating the complex reality with childlike clarity. Exactly like that, Elena agreed, struck once again by how this remarkable story had blurred the boundaries between wild and domestic, human and animal, separation and connection. The formal conclusion of the intensive research phase was marked by a gathering at the Williams home, where team members shared their findings and reflections with the family that had become integral to their work. Dr. Reyes, whose initial scientific skepticism had evolved into profound respect for the phenomena they had documented, summarized their unprecedented observations. What began as an extraordinary rescue, a pregnant bobcat saving an abandoned puppy, has expanded our understanding of interspecies relationships in ways that will influence conservation science for generations, he stated, his formal tone belied by the emotion evident in his voice. The sage-shadow relationship has demonstrated that the boundaries we perceive between species are more permeable and adaptable than previously understood. Dr. Lin, whose veterinary expertise had been crucial throughout the project, added her perspective. The physiological evidence is as compelling as the behavioral. The immune transfer we documented between Sage and Shadow during his early care established biological connections that appear to have facilitated their ongoing bond. Carlos, whose decades of wildlife experience had given him a unique vantage point on the unfolding story, offered a more philosophical reflection. In 30 years of wildlife work, I've learned that animals often have capabilities we haven't yet discovered because we haven't created the right conditions to observe them. Sage and Shadow have given us a glimpse of what's possible when circumstances allow natural intelligence and adaptability to express themselves fully. For Elena, whose documentation had brought this remarkable story to the world, the project's official conclusion felt like the turning of a page rather than the closing of a book. Her photographs and footage had already formed the basis for a National Geographic documentary, and her forthcoming book had generated unprecedented pre-publication interest. More importantly, she had witnessed something that had transformed her understanding of the natural world and her place within it. A year ago, I was a wildlife photographer looking for interesting subjects, she shared with the gathered group. Today, I've been forever changed by what Sage and Shadow have shown us about cooperation, adaptation, and the possibility of connection across boundaries we thought were fixed. As the formal research project transitioned to long-term monitoring, the broader impact of the Sage-Shadow story continued to expand. The Williams Wildlife Corridor became a model for similar initiatives across Texas, with multiple ranching families committing land to create connected habitats for bobcats and other native species. The Texas Wildlife Society established a dedicated research program focused on interspecies relationships, with Shadow as its unofficial mascot. Perhaps most significantly, public perception of bobcats underwent a profound transformation. Species that had once been feared or misunderstood became symbols of intelligence and adaptability. Hunting restrictions were strengthened throughout the state, and habitat preservation initiatives received unprecedented support. 2 years after Shadow's remarkable rescue by a pregnant bobcat, Elena returned to Double Creek Ranch for a follow-up visit. The research station had been maintained as a minimally invasive monitoring facility, collecting data on the expanded bobcat population now thriving in the protected corridor. Jason Williams greeted her at the property line, Shadow trotting faithfully by his side. The once small puppy had matured into a handsome black Labrador, his bearing somehow different from typical domestic dogs, more alert, more connected to the landscape around him. "How are they all doing?" Elena asked as they walked the familiar path toward what had once been Sage's primary territory. "Thriving," Jason replied with evident satisfaction. "Scout has established a family of his own on the eastern corridor. Willow's territory has expanded north. The others are doing well too, according to the monitoring data. And Sage? Jason smiled, glancing down at Shadow, who had suddenly perked up. His attention focused on something in the distance. Still here, still sovereign in her original territory, and still connected to our unusual family member. As if responding to an unheard call, Shadow looked up at Jason with questioning eyes. Understanding the unspoken request, Jason nodded. "Go on, boy. We'll catch up." They watched as Shadow loped ahead, his movements fluid and purposeful as he disappeared into the brush. Following at a respectful distance, Elena and Jason arrived at a small clearing where a familiar scene unfolded before them. Sage, now in her prime as a mature bobcat, sat in dappled sunlight at the edge of the clearing. Beside her, maintaining the precise distance that had evolved through their years together, sat Shadow. No contact, no obvious interaction, just two remarkable animals sharing space in comfortable companionship, defying every conventional boundary between wild and domestic predator and prey. "Some connections," Elena said softly, feeling tears prick at her eyes, "transcend all the categories we try to impose on them." As they watched in reverent silence, Sage rose gracefully and disappeared into the underbrush, returning to her wild domain. Shadow remained seated for a moment longer, as if honoring her departure, before turning back toward his human family. In his eyes, Elena saw something that defied simple explanation, a wisdom born from living successfully in two worlds, from building a bridge where no bridge was thought possible. In that gaze, she recognized the profound truth at the heart of this extraordinary story, that compassion, when allowed to express itself fully, could transcend the boundaries of species, creating connections that enriched and expanded all lives it touched.